Travis,
Hello, sir.
I look forward to talking to you every week. There's not even like a time when I say, I got to talk to Travis this week.
Well,
I
you know what?
always look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And I'm jealous because you're clearly just sort of there with your shirt buttoned down. I've got layers on even in my own home because it's dropping like crazy here in Southwest Georgia, which it's not common.
I got a long sleeve shirt on and I'm already too hot in the middle of winter in sunny Southern California, brother.
Wow.
Yep.
Color me jealous.
I got my surf shorts on.
Goodness. It's depressing.
Oh, wow. Good to be alive.
How are you? How's your new year moving along?
It's moving along fine. I got lots of work. Things are good. God is good. I did a talk yesterday, 2 days ago, whenever Sunday was, yesterday.
Yeah.
And that went well at church, and things are good. I have a fabulous wife and a good life.
There you go. It's always nice to have those.
Yep.
So, well, look, we were talking last week on the Trinity in the Old Testament.
Yes. Let's continue that conversation.
I think one way to go about it, we talked last week about the two powers of heaven. And that, of course, is the doctrine that was held by some, a minority of Jews before and after the birth of Christ, who were not Trinitarians, that's for sure, but they recognized at least two persons who were distinct from each other, who were appropriately called Jehovah.
Yes.
And it would seem that the charge of blasphemy, when Jesus says to the high priest who asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus says, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming in the clouds of heaven," alluding to Daniel 7:13 and 14, but also possibly alluding to this two powers doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the best reading, most scholars do tend to think that especially if they're Christian, they tend to think that the best reading of the text just is the claim that when Caiaphas rends his robe and says, "You have heard the blasphemy," and they all condemn him to death, the blasphemy just is his claim to be someone who is equal to God. But I think understanding the two powers of heaven is a great way to further understand the context of what Jesus is saying, so that the blasphemy charge is you are in league with those people who see two powers in heaven. And even worse, you're claiming to be one of those powers.
So in his book, Alan Siegel, does he talk about, I think you mentioned this, that this was labeled as heretical around 50 or 100 years after Christ because it just sounded too Christian. It sounded too Trinitarian.
Yeah, and this doctrine is also alluded to in the later traditions, like what you find in the Mishnah and the Talmud. In fact, if memory serves, that's where it is condemned. So the Mishnah was laid down in writing around 200, and then the Talmud, the rest of it, the Gemara, that was laid down around the year 500. And so in the late to early Middle Ages, the Orthodox Judaism had evolved to the point where, this two powers doctrine must be rejected.
Do you feel like, this is one of those unanswerable questions, but do you think that practicing Jews should be a little more understanding of our position if they can recognize that there's something sort of kind of similar, or at least a precursor to the Trinity in their own history?
Should be, yeah. I mean, as you know, I think Jehovah's Witnesses should be far more sympathetic to what we're saying too, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah.
So, I think in our lesson today, I think that talking about the Messiah and whether the Old Testament predicts a divine Messiah would be a good call. And I want to focus on 3 texts. Well, actually 4. Daniel 7. We're going to go back to that. But before we get there, I'd like to go to Isaiah 9:6, Isaiah 7:14, and Micah 5:2.
Okay.
So do you want to do the honor of reading it, or would you like me to?
Sure. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's do Isaiah 9:6.
Okay. Let me get it up here.
I have it if you want it.
I have it. How far do you want me to read?
Just read. We can just read verse 6.
For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
Very, very good. So there are controversial issues we're not going to get into today, but I do want to focus on that word El Gabor, which is translated mighty God in the text.
Okay.
Now, notice he's called mighty God. And each of these names reveals some aspect of who the Messiah is. I guess I will open up the can of worms about the eternal Father. So some people think, well, that means that Jesus is the Father, and that now a kind of modalism is pressed.
Mm-hmm.
But eternal Father can have various connotations. And so the point is not that Jesus is the Father, but that Jesus is related to us as an eternal Father. Isaiah will later say in Isaiah 53 that he will see his offspring. Not that Jesus actually has children, but that he is the one through whom children are adopted into God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an eternal Father in that sense.
I just take it to mean he is. It doesn't say all of mighty God. It says mighty God. And if you have a Trinitarian understanding, it's going to be clearer that can mean he is divine in his own right.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah. Now, critics will look at that and they'll say, well, look, I mean, that's just saying that he bears the name of God. Like he's the mighty God in the sense that a lot of prophets and a lot of heroes of the Bible had God's name in them. Take the name Yeshua, and our Lord is named Yeshua in Hebrew. But there's another person named Yeshua, Joshua, and it means the Lord saves. Now, you don't think that Joshua, the great hero of the Old Testament, was God, but he did bear God's name. And so people will often look at these names and they'll say, that's just offering the characteristics of the Messiah such that God is truly with him and he acts like eternal Father to us, and he is the Prince of Peace. But all of that is through God's power, not that the Messiah is God. But the problem with that interpretation is that the word mighty God, El Gabor, is only found 4 times in the Old Testament. All of them refer to Jehovah. They're only references to Jehovah. In fact, if you go in the very next chapter, this is chapter 10, and you go to verse 21, notice what it says. I'm going to start with verse 20. Now it will be in that day that the remnant of Israel and those of the house of Jacob who have escaped will never again rely on the one who struck them, but will truly rely on Jehovah, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. So notice that in the very next verse, or the very next chapter rather, it's using the word mighty God as a reference to God himself. So if Isaiah 9:6 is not teaching that the Messiah is God, you would have to conclude that it's the only place where mighty God is used, El Gabor is used, where it doesn't refer to Jehovah. So what's more likely? That it does refer to Jehovah because it's used in this way and all the other texts is used, including the context of Isaiah 9:6, or that it just means something different than what all the other texts mean? Well, to ask the question is to answer it.
And the argument the other way is it works too. No other prophet or even human being in the Old Testament is called this other than God.
Right. Call this other than God. And since the Messiah is clearly in view here, he must be God. Now, right. If you just go to 2 chapters earlier and you go to Isaiah 7, and you and I have talked about Isaiah 7 before, but we'll just say verse 14, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin is with child and is bearing a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. And Matthew goes out of his way to interpret what Emmanuel means. It means God with us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could possibly argue that in Isaiah 7:14, that's just a divine title given to the child, not meant to convey anything about the child's essence. It's only meant to convey something about the child and God's desire to be with him. That's a possibility. And or the child is a symbol that represents God's presence with his people. Now, I've done a lot of study on Isaiah 7:14. And it's a long, drawn-out argument. Critics will say that the word Alma, translated virgin, doesn't mean virgin. It just means a young woman. Mm-hmm. And so this is just a natural birth of a normal child. They will also point out that the context strongly suggests that this is not messianic. It's just talking about a war that was going on at the time and has nothing to do with long-term messianic prophecy, especially if you're talking about something that happened 700 years later. Now, we've talked about this in our show, so I'm not going to develop the point except to say we have defended the idea that Alma means virgin. And given the supernatural birth of this child, it's strongly suggested that this child is more than just a human. And when you link Isaiah 7 with Isaiah 9, clearly the mighty God, the child who's a Prince of Peace in Isaiah 9, who is the Messiah, is the very child of Isaiah 7:14. Mm-hmm. You have a kind of double warrant coming out of Isaiah suggesting that the Messiah is God.
If I look this verse up in a Bible version that a Jew would read, how is that word translated?
It is often translated young woman.
Okay.
Right.
And are there English Christian translations that translate it young woman?
Yes, the New Revised Standard Version will translate it as young woman. There was a big controversy that came up way back in the 1950s when the Revised Standard Version came out, and it was either the New Revised Standard Version or they were putting out a new edition of the Revised Standard Version. And the reason there was controversy is because the Revised Standard Version chose to translate Alma as young woman. And Cyrus Gordon, who was a Jewish scholar, wrote a very brief essay where he went after the Revised Standard Version.
Really?
Yeah, and he pointed out that we had Ugaritic texts even in his day, strongly suggesting that the Ugaritic equivalent of the word Alma in Hebrew is clearly used to refer to someone who's never had relations. And so this is the word that you would use for a young virgin. Mm-hmm. Now, this conclusion, as I pointed out before, in a book by Gentry Enrico, the mother of the reigning king, sorry, the mother of the infant king. And they do an exhaustive treatment of all the uses of Alma, not just in the Bible, but just in all cognate literature. And they conclude that that's the precise word that you would use if you want to talk about a young virgin. Now, there is another word for virgin called betula. The word betula means virgin. But that's a word that can refer to a person who's a virgin, whether they are young or old. So Joel 1:8 speaks of a betula who weeps for the husband of her youth. Now, I usually disagree with Rabbi Tobias Singer, but his argument is actually very strong here. He points out that this is not a misuse of the word betula. This is not an exception. This is not saying that betula means here it means a woman who has had sexual relations. Rather, it probably means an old maid who weeps or mourns over the husband of her youth. When she was a young girl, she got married, but before they could come together as husband and wife, he died. And Joel is speaking of the devastation that is in the land of Israel. Crops are not growing, war is upon us. And even now, here in Joel 1:8, we have this betula weeping for the husband of her youth. And I think that given the context, that's what the meaning of the word probably is.
Okay.
And yet, that doesn't destroy the point, because this would mean that betula is the appropriate word to use when you're talking about an older virgin. Alma would not be appropriate. Alma is for the young virgin. And so because there's that distinction between a virgin of any age for which betula could be used, and Alma is reserved only for young damsels, young women who are virgins, those who are of marriageable age, it's appropriate that Isaiah would have chosen Alma to indicate that the girl who's going to bear the Messiah is going to be a relatively young woman.
Yeah.
Who is a virgin.
That makes sense, especially when you put it together with all the other the verses.
Right.
Travis, is it fair to say, this may be a difficult question to answer, but is it fair to say that all of the passages in the Old Testament that we believe as Christians refer to the Messiah, that reading them as the Messiah is a easier, more natural way to read the text than reading them as someone else?
I believe so, yes. I think that when you're looking at a text like Isaiah 9:6, everybody grants that that's the Messiah. When you're reading a text like Isaiah 7, I will agree that it's not clear, but there are clues that get you there.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, but J. Warner Wallace, he wrote a book called Person of Interest, which covers the issue of messianic prophecy. And he gave a distinction that has really helped me.
Okay.
He gave a distinction between what is clear and what he gave the distinction between a clear prophecy and a cloaked prophecy. Now that's weird, right? So what is the difference? A cloaked or a clear prophecy would be like the one we're about to look at. Micah 5:2, clearly the Messiah is going to come and he's going to be born in Bethlehem.
Right.
Can't get clearer than that. But then you have a cloaked prophecy. And that would be one where, even though the original intent was this is the Messiah, it is cloaked in its reception. So the author intends for it to be of the Messiah, but the audience hears it differently. So I guess there are examples of this. A good one would be Isaiah 53. When you read through it, it's not absolutely clear that this is a messianic prophecy. It's a cloaked prophecy.
Yeah.
But in light of Christ's coming, when you go back and read it, it becomes clear. Now, first of all, is that a contrived distinction? And then why would God do that?
I was just going to ask you that. I have an opinion. You want to
Sure.
hear my opinion?
Yeah, please.
I have two. One is Mike Heiser's opinion, and that is that God was hiding the truth from people because the spirit world also reads this material, and he did not want some details of who the Messiah was going to be that clear. He
Right.
wanted to leave that a mystery. But
Right.
and then the second reason I think is I think this idea of taking our faith on faith, there's a real powerful lesson in there. I think there's a sense in which God leaves it up to us. Do we want this to be true? Whatever it is. In this case, Jesus being the Messiah. If we are open to it, we will explore it with an open mind, and then the pieces start to fall in place. But if he gave it to us, he could have changed a few words in some of those verses and just made it absolutely clear. He could have said, in this number of years, in this city, this guy, and he's going to be, 5 feet 10 inches. He could have made it as clear as possible, and he chose not to do that. And I think he doesn't want to make it that easy for us. He wants people to follow him who are willing to do the work and think about it and ponder it and pray about it and consider it and want it to be true to the extent that we'll do some work to find out if it's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's the glory of the king to discover a matter. I forget the exact reference in Proverbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would also add, I mean, I think that Isaiah 7:14 fits into cloak prophecy as well. Like, what if it was absolutely clear that not just a virgin is with child, a virgin will become pregnant, in other words.
Yeah.
But that she will become pregnant without losing her virginity. What if that was absolutely clear in the text? Well, then every time a woman got pregnant by accident,
yeah,
hey, I might be the one.
I'm the one. Yeah.
So, but if you have a cloaked prophecy, then when the real article comes, two things happen. First, you can't accuse Matthew of just making up the story in light of the prophecy.
Yeah.
If it's cloaked. And this is one of the things that I say to skeptics. I usually start with whether Jesus was born of a virgin and not whether he fulfilled prophecy. And I say, okay, let's say that Isaiah ripped the text out of context. What would have motivated him to do that? Well, because he already believed in the virgin birth. And so he came to conclude that the virgin birth happened, and then he went through the Old Testament to try to find a verse and found it. Now, I personally believe he didn't take it out of context, that he did interpret it correctly and all of that stuff. But if the skeptic is right and he just misinterpreted it, you can't say he was inspired by the prophecy to make up the story of the virgin birth. Can't do that.
Yeah.
Because he was scurrying to find the verse to fit the story. So where did the story come from? So that's how I would argue that. Now, this distinction between cloaked and clear, J. Warner Wallace is a detective, and he pointed out that there would often be, and what I'm giving is an illustration to show that this is not some contrived thing. We're just making up to save face. As a cold case detective, one of the things that you have to do is make sure that every little piece of evidence is collected. And when you're collecting it, it's not all clear.
Right.
The correct understanding or its significance isn't understood. And so he gives an anecdote of where he was part of a team and they were collecting the evidence. And one of the evidences that they collected was a button. They didn't know where the button went to, who it belonged to, anything, but it was a button. It was a button that was detached from a piece of clothing. But later, there was a person of interest. And when they went to his home and did an investigation, they noticed a jacket or a coat with a missing button. And all the other buttons on that coat matched the button that they found.
Of course they did. Yeah.
So that becomes now clear. And so cloaked prophecies are not just meant to convey, well, it's your subjective feeling as to how you get there. No, it's cloaked in the sense that the real, true meaning is not well understood by the original audience. But then it becomes clear in light of its fulfillment.
Yeah.
And you got to have both kinds of prophecies that Jesus is going to fulfill. If he's only fulfilling cloaked prophecy, you could say that they were just kind of reading into the prophecies or something. But if you only have clear prophecies, that's going to create more problems than the whole issue solves. So Micah 5:2 says the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem. And here's the text. Starting in verse 1, now muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops. They have laid siege against us. With a rod they will strike the judge of Israel in the cheek. But as for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you will come forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from everlasting, from the days, some people say ancient days, and some texts read from the days of eternity. That's what the New American Standard reads. So it's at least saying that the Messiah's activities precede his birth.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another indication that this person is more than a man. It's not clear in Micah 5:2 that we're dealing with a divine person. But we can at least say he's not just merely human.
Travis, are there I know there's a million Jewish commentaries on all of this stuff before Christ.
Mm-hmm.
What do they say about some of these verses that we take as indications of the Messiah? Do any of them agree with that? How did they interpret this material?
It's really difficult to be Jewish today and believe that the Messiah is going to actually physically be born in Bethlehem. That's kind of a tall order. And that was especially a problem all through the Middle Ages when very few Jews were in the Promised Land. So, yeah, that's a pickle. Many, some critical scholars, many scholars of different stripes will say that Bethlehem is not a literal reference. It's symbolic. It's just saying that the Messiah is going to be a descendant of David.
See, but there's that same thing. Which is the more natural reading?
Absolutely. In Bethlehem Ephratah is the other name for Bethlehem. There's more than one Bethlehem in the land of Israel. And so the very fact that he picks the specific Bethlehem, the city of David, as the place where the Messiah will come from, is a strong indication that Bethlehem is not just symbolic, but it's a reference. And by the way, I agree that it's symbolic. It's referring to the resurrection of the Davidic dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
But I, for the life of me, don't understand how it cannot also be literal. Right.
Why can't it be both?
Yeah, why can't it be both? And we at least have this much in our favor. Those of us who believe that Jesus is the Messiah and that he fulfilled these prophecies, we at least have the luxury of pointing out a very literal fulfillment. We don't have to do the symbolic dance to try to make it fit our version of what the Messiah is.
Right.
We can say our Messiah was born in Bethlehem.
Well, there it is again. You know, the easiest understanding of the New Testament text is that the resurrection was a literal physical resurrection. You really have to twist the logic and the words to come up with just a spiritual resurrection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, Matthew does tell us that it was common knowledge in the days when Jesus was being born. It was just common knowledge that Messiah was going to be born in Bethlehem. They just knew. The wise men didn't know, which would mean that they didn't have access to the prophet Micah when they journeyed to Jerusalem, when they journeyed to Israel. So what's the most natural place to do? You just go to the capital. And there at the capital, they were told, oh, Bethlehem, which is just 5 miles away. So.
This is great stuff, Travis. I really enjoy this. Thinking about the Trinity in the Old Testament, I've always thought that's a fascinating topic. And when you start looking, you just see these little clues all over the place.
Yeah. Well, my friend, we must end, but I'll see you next week.
Well, I hope so. Yes, sir. All right.